Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. Go a couple of things I want to just touch on before we get into the agenda. The first one, introductions. John Espy has joined us. John is the new representative replacing John Ambrosopoulos. John's a rancher down in Parton County, a member of their local working group. And John, welcome to the Sage Grouse team. Thank you. Anything you want to add? You got a 5-minute speech or anything? Okay. Not yet, anyway, right? We will do public comment today, but we will do it at the end of each of the presentation periods, because I think that to go into it at the beginning until we've heard what's been done probably is premature. So we'll do the EO first, and then we'll take public comment on that. We'll have a briefing on noise, break for lunch. We'll come back and talk about mapping. We'll have comments on the mapping exercise after that, and then we'll adjourn. I intend to be done by 2:30, no later than 4 today, to get people on the road. I know for some people it is a break. They have family obligations as well, so that's the intent. Well, that's what we will do. So at 4 o'clock, everybody gets up and walks out, and continue on with your monologue, but we're going to be done. So with that, let me talk a minute about the process today. I think everyone had a chance to see the memo that was sent out relative to what we are doing, and I had a lot of comments over the last couple of weeks. Most particularly concerned about the rate of how we were doing this. Which it's very understandable because not everybody was at the last meeting in Cheyenne. Not everybody went through this process the first time. Who all was here in 07 when we did this and went through this process? We raised hands. Yeah, so the majority of people didn't go through it. The one point in that memo was we're following basically exactly the same process, same kind of timeline, but it was condensed this time because we had to get some of these local working group meetings done before everybody went to the field. And, you know, as you know, the birds are starting to show up at Lex now. We're starting to get that activity for those who are involved in Lex counts and in trying to monitor and do the work that's very important to us. We weren't going to have them if we delayed. So that's why that felt so compressed, and I apologize for that, but I'm not in charge of the count. The second thing on process, talk a little bit about how we'll do this. We will do it much the same as we did the first time. We will take input from the public at every meeting. You'll have an opportunity between meetings to talk to members of the team, and that's welcomed and asked for, frankly. And then we will meet probably 3 or 4 times between now and the end of May. And if you recall in Cheyenne, I made that clear that we'll probably condense our meeting schedule quite a bit so that we're able to do these and work through it. In 07, 08, we were meeting about every 10 days. Probably won't be quite that extreme, but it'll be fairly frequently. Each of those meetings is another iteration. In this case, we have the great fortune that we have an existing executive order, which is the default. If we can't come to agreement, it will stand as it is written. And that's instructions the governor had. I'm happy with what we got. The other part of that to remember is that if we make really radical changes to this executive order, we have to go back to the service again and say, okay, are we still okay with these changes? So there is a lot of reluctance to make massive overhauls to the order, given the uncertain outcome of that request. So we'll go through the order. We'll try and get it done first so that there's time for the Attorney General and other people to review that piece of it, and we'll work through the mapping as we go. We have until the end of May to deliver recommendations to the governor. The governor then has the months of June and July to consider that. And again, if you have input you'd like to take beyond where this route goes, that again will be welcome. The complete package will be delivered to the governor, and then he can make the determination that he chooses. reminding everyone that ultimately it is up to Governor Meade as to what goes in, what is finally adopted as the core areas, and what changes may or may not be contemplated. So that's the process we're going to follow. Any questions about that? Any concerns? Be happy to hear them at this point. Okay. All right, with that, let's do introductions real quick. Lucas, you want to start?
Okay, Lucas Keeler with the Oil and Gas Commission.
Mark Saddleberg, and seeing how I'm sitting between two state agencies, I won't say Game and Fish, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Susan Child, State Land Office.
John Kennedy, Wyoming Game and Fish Department.
Kenny Ballard, Samson Resources.
Dave Gold, Thunder Basin Nebraska Recreation System Association.
Mary Flannery. Sherry Lori, Rocky Mountain Power.
Lyndon Beaker, American Colony.
Larry Dix, Wyoming Senate.
Brian Jefferson, NRCS.
Good morning, Buddy Green, Wyoming Cheyenne.
Paul Ulrich, General Energy.
Bob Budd, Wildlife Natural Resource Trust.
Fred Bud Aarons, FMC. Jeremiah Haney, Governor's Office.
Joy Bannon, Wyoming Wildlife Federation.
Dennis J. Forest Service.
John Espy, Agricultural Representative.
Craig Smith, Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality.
Brian Rutledge, Alabama. Jim Lyons, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Minerals Department. Dan Hyland, Wyoming Outdoor Council.
Molly Copeland, Nature Conservancy. Stephanie Kane, ICS International.
John Cash, Grizzly.
Renee Taylor, Taylor Environmental.
Doug Cooper, Federal Livestock Company.
Mac Fuller, SWCA.
John Winter, representing Green One.
Margaret Lacey, Chief Tourist Association.
Inspector Amber, URC.
Tony Hussein. Jim Ryder.
Denver Passing Resources.
Representative, Spider Pump Services.
Agriculture, Death and Energy.
Tim Cannon, URC. Tim Meyer, U.S. Forest Service and Nicholas.
Top License Sampson Resources.
Esther Hackett, Building Association.
Nick Owens, Anadarko. Matt Call, Wildland. Paul Jensen, West North Point School.
Matter two, that was
Jeff Dodgegate, Jim Barber, Beach Petroleum. Max.
Lee Camp.
Thank you, Jake.
Steve Scores, Jim Whiteman, Vermont Resources.
Wheelchair, okay.
Michael Madrid, BLM. Work solved, and we need people are calling.
Contacted with his social worker.
Great.
Great.
Family as well. Association of Conservation Districts. That was easy, Wyoming Mining Association.
Two kids. Rich Atkins, who's Sean Riders, Water. Tom Rogers, Water Conservancy. Tom Patterson, Game and Fish.
Miss Woodford, Game and Fish.
Tony Long, Game and Fish.
Hillary Duncan, Grass Mountain.
Zach Carter,
Okay, thank you all. Doug, you want to introduce yourself real quick? Okay. All right. Before we get going, I'd like to welcome Jim Lyons here. Jim is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Department of the Interior. and I asked him just to say a few words. He's been trying to get to a SGIT meeting now since last fall, and apparently he's not in charge of the weather back in DC. He's missed a couple because of weather, but this time he actually made it where it's nice, not where it's snowy. So Jim, if you have comments, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, first thing I'll say is I'm actually going back to snow, just so you know that. But, no, I appreciate the invitation, Bob and Jeremiah, to sit in and watch how things work. Consider we've heard a lot about the collaborative work that's going on here in Wyoming. As I said yesterday in an announcement of the Sweetwater River Conservancy, Wyoming's leading the way in putting together a strategy to deal with the challenges of conserving sage grouse, managing for multiple use. So it's an opportunity for me to see how you all are making this work at a time when you're kind of reviewing 5 years of success and trying to figure out the next step. So again, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be a part of this discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Mary?
All right, what we started with, I handed out two things to the SGIT. One is, you can have by 14, looks like this, it has the side-by-side, it's called info document, and the other one is the EO only 5 SGIT document.
Exactly that one.
Yeah.
You all served on that subgroup. Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. Thank you. Everyone. All right, pull it up. So the one document we have is the summation of all the proposed changes. But the document I'd like to work off of is the side-by-side. This one will be easier because what we try to do is go through it and show which ones were new, which ones were going to move, what changes, so that you didn't have to keep flipping pages. So each of you look at full language and find it in this. So I also numbered the sections so we can kind of follow through with some kind of order. So Brian had, okay, so I'm just going to go on page 1. There were some minor changes where we had disagreement. I tried to highlight that in the notes. So if you look at line number 4, there was some concern about despite significant population declines across the range. So we weren't in agreement on that. Number 5, no change. All the way to 9, there was no change. We thought those were all appropriate. On page 2, number 10 through 14, Brian had offered several additional whereas, Brian Rutledge. And Brian, do you want to just kind of share your thought process behind that?
Yeah, the primary objective here was to express what we're already doing. Where the original order talked about what we were going to do, what we thought was in the future for this. What we're trying to do is turn this into much more a statement of where Wyoming has stood and stands in achieving conservation. So that's the primary objective on most of these. I can go through a piece deal, but the point was that we're getting it done. That we're not thinking about it. We're not. Most of the states are going to have to write their EOs prospectively as to what they see themselves doing in the future. And what we're doing is responding to a lot of years of hard work that's already working. So if you read these, that's the light we're trying to shine on.
And I have to, Dave talked about global replace. So as you look at number 10, on the right side, second line, it says federal age no changes. It should be, what I did was a global replace for MC, the no change, and it did it everywhere. So I look correct. So I apologize.
Thank you for clarifying that I didn't write no change.
So, do you want me to just keep going, Bob?
Well, what I'd like to do is, where there is no change, unless somebody has a compelling reason to discuss it, I would like those to stand. That is the default. There's no reason to go and discuss those in any detail. Those that are a major change, and the minor changes are, you know, if it's word spending semantics, let's not spend a bunch of time spinning out on that. The new stuff I would like to talk, and whether we do it in aggregate or individually, I don't care, but I think probably in this case, there are 5 there that are proposed as new. I'd like to know people's thoughts about that, because that's one of those I'm quite nervous about, to be honest with you. You go add a bunch of, yes, there are whereases, but you add a bunch of that. Does that change what we have to do vis-a-vis the service? Mark, your thoughts on it, and then other people as well.
I thought in going through the changes that there wasn't anything that raised a red flag. A lot of them are just clarifications. A lot of them are explanations of how things are done. So I was very comfortable with what was suggested for the changes.
Okay. Other thoughts, Jeremiah?
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to go back up to number 4. Although that's listed as a minor change, I'm still not convinced. I believe that's a minor change. The addition is the language, despite significant population declines across its range. My question was, when we discussed this in the subcommittee, what exactly does that add to this whereas? I'm not sure it adds anything.
I can tell you the purpose of writing it was that we're cognizant of the realities across the region. We're not hoping with blinders. We're going to see 2 studies coming out shortly that state declines in population. None of us are going to be happy with those studies, but I think it's recognizing that we know that there has been decline, but that Wyoming maintains the most robust population. Otherwise, I think it looks as if we're working with blinders. I'm not like doing a lot of sword falling over this one, but I think it's making it clear that we recognize that there is an issue and we're dealing with it.
Brian, let's talk a minute about that though in context, if we could. If that's it, despite long-term population declines, that would make more sense to me. Where it says significant, you know, we all saw a report here, 2 weeks ago, 55% decline. Well, there have been many 55% declines in populations because it's a cyclic nature of the species. So is there a way to put this in context that longer term, as opposed to just saying, boom, at this point, this day and age, we have this decline? I don't think it gives us any temporal space.
That was not the intent of the comment. It is, I certainly hope that changing the language to demonstrate that this is a long-term effect rather than a short-term.
Okay, thoughts, Paul?
I think we can reword it. We had some verbiage a few weeks ago that we didn't write it down.
Paul, 2 weeks ago, that's true.
Process. Can we agree to shelve this and come up with some recommended?
Send it back to the committee. Okay?
Yeah, and I just do want to clarify, we were not trying to apply this most recent case. Right. This is a long-term decline that everybody's aware of.
Let's just the charge back to the group, put a temporal scale on this and take another shot. Okay? All right, everybody comfortable with that? All right, go ahead.
Okay, so we're back to the new number.
One of the discussions that you and I had, we talked to Brian about this, is avoiding the attempt of putting too many whereases without giving the impression that there's a whole bunch of whereases rather than a whole lot of therefores. Really, what is the so one of the discussion points is, should perhaps these new whereases along the lines of what Brian was talking about go into a letter that the governor would sign at the same time that he might execute a new order to lay out what that has been our success over the past 6 or 7 years, rather than So that's just something that we've thrown out there as something.
And clarify that a little bit. How many of you read Utah's executive order? No, it's like 5 pages of whereases and then about 2 there. And I will tell you that for a lot of us, we kind of went, okay, so, and I really want to avoid that. So what we've talked about with Brian and others, who, and Dan, I think, was aware of this as well, is, you know, there should be a delivery letter from the governor that says, this is what we've done, this is where we're at, and here is my order as we move forward. That all becomes a part of the record. That all is, it captures all of this. Is that a better delivery mechanism than 10 pages of whereas and a couple of there? And we're not at that point, but to over exaggerate a little bit there. How do you feel about it as a group? What feels right to you? And Brian, I'll give you the first shot. I mean, you guys brought this forward. So,
well, my concern is that people read this and understand that Wyoming, as Jim says, Wyoming is the forefront of this deal and has been doing it. We're not proposing to do it. All of these are indicating that we have stepped up and we are there and we are improving as we go. And so I felt like, and it's not 10 pages, you know, it's 5 whereas. And I thought that they added tremendously to the fervor with which this is delivered. In the past, I've seen it delivered, and I've been pleased with our results of having the executive order. But I think when people read it, they don't get that Wyoming's there, done that, going for it. And that's what we're trying to do, is deliver something that really stays the case.
Okay, other thoughts?
Number 13 doesn't seem like that big. Whereas it says Wyoming shall maintain. Does that give the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service a little more comfort, or? It seems to me as the whereas states what is, and it says shall, it's saying what shall we do.
It's actually there for. Let's hold that, because I think what we want to do is let's have a conversation first about how you want to handle all of the premises, and no disagreement whatsoever with what Brian's saying. I think it was great that they flagged that and said, hey, at some point you got to say, we've been down this road now for 7 years. Here's where we're at. Does that fit better as whereas? If it does, great. Or does it fit in a different delivery mechanism? And that's what I kind of like to get input from the team. So Dave, go ahead.
Just one thought is that, you know, delivery letters in kind of the corporates of the executive order, we all know when it goes, they're all together, but a couple years down the road, the delivery, you know, if you read the executive order, you may not get the delivery letter as part of that. And so it may get separated. You know, we're all familiar with that now, but in a couple years, it's separated and you lose all that piece and you see the executive order, it seems pretty plain. My only thought on that.
Good point. Other thoughts?
I think we, in several other sections, I think we added some good work that's been done that wasn't in it whereas. So I'm not sure that it would completely dilute the message and send the positives in. So I'd be in favor of that, and maybe we can speak to that.
I'm kind of here at 50-50 here, guys. Okay, let's try this. Another charge back to your group, Mary. Do both.
For all of them?
Yeah, and here's what I'm thinking. I think, let's say that in the end, we all agree with Dave and say we want it in the body. It doesn't hurt to have it in the delivery letter as well. But should we come back and go, you know what, it looks watered down, then you have that alternative there. And as a group that is most intimately involved with it, I think having you guys go back and take a stab at both probably makes the most sense. Is that fair? You guys have worked through this. I know you counted it, beat it, you know, that is an item, and thank you for that. But let's do that, and then if we're agreed to, that that's a logical approach or next step for that group, then let's go through the new ones and ask which of those in or out as far as the consideration. So Lyndon, we're back to your point. I think you're right. I think the monitoring is a narrative. This is, the state will do this. So let's go through them quickly and see what we think. Number 11, any argument, any discussion about that? So we're going to go pretty quick, so if you do, you got to speak up. 12. 13. It's already been flagged. 14.
The only thing I have there would be is to maybe add a year in front of the executive order piece, because it says in accordance with the executive order.
It should be with this executive order. So it refers to itself.
Okay. All right, so 15, 16, there's a minor change on 16. What is that?
It's the last two sentences. It says that the listing would interfere with ongoing and effective collaborative efforts. I don't think there was any disagreement there.
Okay.
Question for the group is interfere or strong word. Maybe there's an interfere and foreclose or stop. You know, I throw that in.
17, minor change.
It's basically the same thing, but what they wanted to do. I think what we wanted to do was include everyone. It's a broader statement about everyone.
Okay. 18.
There was debate on the highlighted language again that Paul had mentioned due to declines in population. Due to concerns about population declines.
Well, I'm same concern as the last time, which, I think the statement minus that addition that is highlighted is strong in itself. Our charge is to maintain healthy greater state trout populations and habitats, etc., which we're doing.
Okay. 19 just reflects that this was statutory.
Just one comment, Bob. I guess to me, that would go back to my thought, whatever the changes are for this one as well. It seems like it's the same way.
Yeah, consistency. Yeah. Very good.
That could be cleaned up as far as.
19.
It's pretty cluttered. Should just say whereas the 62nd legislature of the state of Wyoming enacted legislation.
Establish the SGIT as a statutory.
What's that?
I said, should just say establish the SGIT as a statutory body.
It's just.
Basically, clean it up. 20 and 21.
So, yeah, Brian, you want to share? That's the same thought, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is added to the ones stating the city exists and giving it charge. Which I think, and it, just to reflect on whether or not he's doing the letter or in the executive order. If they're in the letter, they're not in the law. If they're in the executive order, they're in the law.
Okay. We'll kick that back to the rest. What then? Obviously, one question that will come up is why aren't all the new ones together?
Because we put them in order, we put them in the order that we thought it was best.
Okay.
That's all.
I assume that. Then 20 and 21, basically go back, take a look at those. Okay, 22 is no change, 23 is no change, minor change 24.
And what we did is we added that basically we're coordinating our state effort is coordinated with federal land management agencies. We wanted to bring in the significance of the coordination between federal and state.
Okay, any disagreement with that? Fine. 24, minor change. You must have added the other states.
Yeah, I think that's what we were.
That was self-aggrandizement. We were just patting ourselves in the back.
I think let's take that. Let's take that. And I'll tell you why. I think that's incendiary to the other states, and those relationships are fairly fragile as it is. So just a second. Any disagreement? 25 is new.
Again, that's just discussing the relationship with our federal agencies.
How is that almost seems duplicative to me, is it or not, Brian?
I don't think so. I think it, brings out the full clarity of what we're doing there. This is not one that I think is other than asserting the relationship, that this is a continuous relationship, and that we're not offering to step away. We're offering to continue our relationship.
Okay.
I don't think it's needed. So.
Take a hard look at that one.
Yeah, consistent with the previous is the goal of trying to outline how many limits of acres.
It seems long, I guess. Can we narrow it down? Would be one thing I'd throw back to the group. Ideally, your whereases would all be standalone, one sentence. Boom, boom, boom. Anytime we get this long, I kind of go, what are we saying?
We're trying to avoid doing it one more.
Yeah, well, red pen, not blue. 26, minor change.
Yeah, and we said we're not gonna change that.
26.
Yes.
Okay, go.
That's 25. I guess I'm trying to read what are we trying to say here? We know that there is R&D divisions, of course, so the planning divisions are not. What is that? We're going to say something. How does that exactly play into that? We're right here is acknowledging that the federal agencies are doing this. Okay. So I guess I'm kind of wondering if it needs to be there first. If it does, what are we really saying? How does it enhance the therefore?
As much as it gives a scorecard on what we're doing, as in Jeremiah said, basically it's the acreage involved, where the collaboration is, what's included. And so, if we need to bring that down into a therefore, but I do think we need to statistically state our case.
Can we just say, whereas X number of federal agencies have adopted X number of plans encompassing X number of acres, period? Not all the verbosity? That's really all it does, recognizes that the plans are done. When this is an issue, they will be out. We'll be near the rock.
I think one of the issues is recognizing that they're generally consistent with what we've done.
Okay.
So we say that, and are generally consistent with the government.
That's part of the intent.
All right, get that cleaned up. '26, you did not change. 27.
27 through 31, again, just describing everything. The 127 is specifically talking to the language, the service gap in their candidate list. The rest of them about where we're at and what we've done.
28 boxes me. I'll be very honest with you.
We have already.
Okay, good.
It's 21's the same as 20.
Yeah.
I can give one other point, I guess, on how we address things, Bob, and they can look at it through that way as well. We went through the listing decisions, and we looked at how things were reflected, the concerns of service were reflected in the decision. And we tried to address each of those concerns so that as you go through the executive order, you can literally lay it up against the listing decision and go, oh, well, this is taken care of, this is taken care of. So that's a big part of how we outline how we would approach the changes. So that where they had concerns, we have an answer. So please look at it in that light too as you go.
Yeah, well, this is exactly the same as 21. So one of these.
Well, I'm talking about the impact of it, not just.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. My concern with 28 and 21 is the same. That number is only good today. The second number, the first number is pretty solid. Okay, but the second number is only good today. And you start putting that in a 5-year document. Do we really want to do that?
I can't disagree. I think we need to figure out how we state the case.
Okay.
Minimum letter.
All right, 29.
So, Bob, just for clarification, so in 5 years, let's say, it's very successful, because we're moving beyond current Florida.
Exactly. Which we've seen a little bit in the last few years. You know, we anticipated declines where they did not occur. We maintained population within corridor. We're actually building outside that. I think anytime you lock yourself into a number of animals, given our winters, given our summers, given our natural drought cycles, make a mistake. So if you want to talk in generalities, that's fine. If you pinpoint 82%, that's not even correct today. Yeah.
Well, I think 29 needs to be stricken out there. It's speculative. It's the same issue. Even if the tax agreements today, there's could be rescinded tomorrow. I want to say something that the state has.
Generic.
A generic CCAA that specify numbers and how many they have in the future. Other than the one sentence saying to say that you're favorable, that's the extent of the address to CCAA.
Okay, and I think the same can be said of 30. That number will change, frankly, in June. Because I know what we're looking at funding through the trust, and that number, that changes every 6 months. So that may be a delivery letter piece, but perhaps not in here, Brian.
I understand that. You understand what we're trying to achieve, though, is express the investment that is taking place. I ignore it.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to say that this program is available in the state of Wyoming.
Yeah, we weren't trying to get we were trying to get in there what's already been achieved. Because it is a huge number. And so reflecting that was the purpose here.
Okay.
Can you generally talk about CCAs, conservation bank, conservation easements generically in here, and perhaps in the cover letter have the exact figures to that point?
Yes.
So we were trying to figure out how to get SGI and everything else in there that we invested in the state. So however we can do that so that we're making sure we make that point.
Well, one of the ways that may be considered is just list those regulatory mechanisms, SGI, CCA, CCAA, all these are up and running in Wyoming, and those numbers are subject to change on a daily basis.
My point was we're at hundreds of millions now. And that should be recognized from the outside looking in. That's all.
Got
I guess we'll get back to the original question from the speaker. In my opinion, some of these things are statement of fact. And it might be going back into whereas. I think all of our whereas need to be rationale for all of our variables. So every one of those needs to be looked at. What therefore is that supporting, enhancing, supporting, and what is just the state of life in the world? I think there's two different levels of inclusion here. And so these things are facts of life. And these whereas support these therefore. I think that puts more power behind you therefore.
I think as a member of that group, that's a perfect job for you to do between now and the next meeting.
Thank you for your thoughts.
I completely agree with you. I think as part of the exercise that you're doing as a group, you will track each whereas to a therefore. That will really help to make sure that there is a reason for the whereas to be there. And if you can't do that, Doug, you're spot on. I think what we need, then that needs to come out. It can go in a letter, it can go somewhere else, but at some point, it probably would be a smart move for all of us to take that tracking mechanism and say which whereas is met by the therefore.
And I'm heard, we hadn't had the letter discussion before we wrote a lot of this, but I think I'll put this way, and I kind of hate to, but we've written everything we've written so that when a judge reads it, they can track their way through it. That's the objective here, is that when we get, not if, when we get sued over this, that a reading judge that has all the points laid out, fishbone there right in front of them. And so they go piece by piece through it, and they're not going, what did they do?
Okay, well, Doug's going to take care of that between now and the next meeting. So, Sherry.
Back on number 27, it seems like we've addressed that in 7 through 10 in the beginning on the services finding on the list that they found as candidates, and that we would be addressing it, addressing the executive order. So I don't know if that's kind of duplicative of what's in 7 through 10.
I was almost thinking of combining 27 and 10. So both have that.
So I'm gonna plead, because I'm part of the confusion. So what happened is, what you all have is not the very last one. I had erased some of those duplicative. So that was in part my fault. So some of this was in that. I gave you the second to last version.
Just consolidated, Sherry, that's a good catch. Just make sure you get, and that's one clean wash, just make sure, okay, is this saying the same thing? But I think if you do the drill that Doug has described, you'll line those, because you'll have two lines pointing the same, therefore go, wait, you're saying the same thing.
Yeah, just a quick comment on the discussion surrounding 29. Maybe one of the things that could be used for is to really highlight some of the public-private partnerships, because there's been a statewide CCAA, there's been other private groups that are doing that, the association, and that will hopefully have ours done, and that might be a way to kind of build on that it's been not just state, it's been private entities as well.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Mary, you're capturing all these thoughts, I know. So I think as much as it seems like we're picking you to death, I really do think it's helpful. I think when you get that really clean, nice document to track. So, okay, 32, no change. 33, minor change.
The name of the agencies was added into it so that people can get the draft of the executive order.
And this was just to call out the regulatory agency, regulatory side. Okay. 34.
That's not changing. There was a question that did come up, is that it's tied long enough?
Let's talk about that, because that has come up several conversations. Is 5 years long enough? Let me give you the background of why we ended up with 5. Governor Meade came in at the time, Larry, I think the legislature was having a real Donnybrook over executive orders. And there was a bill actually that was proposed to eliminate all executive orders. That bill did not pass, but what Governor Meade said is, I'm going to look at all of them, and if they are obsolete or if they shouldn't be adopted, they're not going to be adopted. When he came to Sage Grouse, he said, look, if it's only as good as, there's no timeline on it, there's not much assurance given back to the service that we have a commitment over a period of time. Further, if that time period is less than or equal to the term of the sitting governor, then there's no bridge between where you ended up with, for example, Governor Meade inherited Governor Threethal's order, gave him time to review it and finally issue his own. So the 5 years was meant to go beyond the term of the sitting executive, and then another review would take place. The question people have had is that adequate? Should it be 10? Should it be 7? Should it be whatever number? And I don't have an opinion on that one way or the other. I don't know if other people do, but that's why the 5 was there. It's not biologically constructed. It actually is a regulatory function, and it is constructed around maintaining continuity. So thoughts about that?
Bob, I will tell you some of the comments I've received and certainly some of my own thoughts on this. Whether 5 years is right or not, I'm not entirely sure. But when we did start this process, one of our significant concerns as an industry is consistency over a longer period of time. I think that lack of consistency with what we have recently learned through the local working group mapping process raises a significant question in my mind on whether or not 5 years is appropriate.
Okay.
What we plan, we're discussing, and I don't know. I do know that when you started planning projects in 2008 and 2009 and 2010, based on an existing core area map, and invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions and millions of dollars in the premise that that acreage is not core, you should have some assurance that that investment is not going to be peeled away in 3 or 4 years through this process. I think it warrants some significant discussion. I don't know if 5 years is right. I don't know if 10 years is right. From a planning perspective, a 5-year window is much too short for our industry.
Okay. Lyndon?
I would agree. It's just from a permitting aspect, you're looking at half that time. Beginning to potential improvement or approval of the mine. So 5 years might be a little short.
Disagree with you, all
Someone asked you.
I don't want to job.
Keep talking.
The reason we put 5 in to start was so that we could build a track record. And if you look at our grazing executive order, it was so that we don't make those changes without some track record. But you don't want to let things get to the point where your conservation is either not working or needs to be changed. So that was the reason 5. It was kind of a, okay, we need some consistency, but we can't just let it go on forever. So what I'm thinking is the 5 years needs to be looked at. Now, we're almost addressing a secondary problem, trying to change this executive order to address federal committee, which is atrocious. I mean, we should not be stuck in committee for 10, 12 years. I mean, that's bad for the industry. So, but I don't want it to cause us to make a mistake here that perceives that, okay, we're going to allow a bad situation to continue for X amount of years. So one of the reasons some of that committee delay has gone on is because we haven't been able to amend our MPs and like the land law, there was a lot of things jammed up. Now it's open and hopefully things will start to move as fast as they will move in the federal government. So I guess what I'm saying is I think we need to say, okay, 5 years, we're not going to change it willy-nilly, but we are going to look at it within reasonable time. And you know, maybe for my good friends, we can go to 6 years. But you see where I'm going?
I do, and I think your assignment is to rewrite NEPA, so that's.
I've been working on that for 15 years.
Understood.
Well, we all agree with me.
I'll get back to you here. Danny, go ahead.
I agree with Paul, but I also agree with the permitting timeline. I've been agreeing with the permitting timeline. By the time you get the permits and that changes again, you're in trouble. One thing, and then we all know where we are economically with oil right now. So there are decisions to slow down because it's not economical right now. And I've heard recently many disparities about places that we've had outside of core not being developed, and there are economic reasons, but that doesn't mean that they may not be developed. And so you've got to have some certainty to make some future plans.
Are we really talking about possibly two different levels? Because the part here that I think is most important is absent compelling information. I mean, theoretically, right now, we can change that map. The government can change it anytime we want. But that compelling data part to me is there. What we don't have is a hard end time that we actually do this exercise we're doing now. Nor do we have a shorter time at which we would say there will be a review. So are we looking at a 3-year review and a 7-year mandate, or what do you have?
That's exactly what I was thinking as you were talking, is that are we too schooled up on the number, or are we lacking focus on the process? And perhaps there's another done on sort of either way, but it does seem like that's the kind of thing Doug was talking about. You know, you don't want to wait too long, but if there's a process in place that a big component of what we're going to be doing is monitoring. Is there time in monitoring and being able to develop a process that's more responsive to the situation that Doug described? Again, I think we're very focused on a number, and I'm not sure that
Go ahead. Yeah, I actually think the number weakens the whole thing, and it weakens the outcome that we want to accomplish. Because now you're constrained by number. You read the language that exists today, it says absence of substantial and compelling information. That's the trick. And if you don't have that information, we're not changing it. But we put a number on there and say, you do. The way I read this is, you have if you have substantial and compelling information, that's great, but we're not going to look at it until next number of years.
Well, it doesn't say that.
Well, but it infers that that's when you actually come back up, and that's where I get buddy. I'm more interested in identifying the appropriate process and the time frame for that process, because then it becomes a question: is the time frame drive the process, or is the process driving the time frame?
Okay, good point.
So I think we need to get rid of it.
Is there a way to coordinate this with other review processes, federal lands, et cetera, state lands, wherever it may be, so that it makes more sense that we state that these will be coordinated on those bases rather than a live and die year number?
I think then all we're going to do is mapping every year of our lives, and I don't think that serves. Go ahead.
Getting back to Paul's original point, one of the things we've prided ourselves on with this executive order is that we respect those existing rights. And I wonder if to address Paul's issue, that we don't go in and make sure that we respect those rights, regardless of this sort of timeline review that we're doing here. So maybe it's, we've got to talk about that. That's why, right, I don't know. But the issue that I'm hearing, perhaps more respect to pre-existing rights.
And probably those two should be tied together here, what you're saying.
That, or we have a good handle on that.
Part of the year numbers.
I understand that the reasoning for the 5 to expand or to cross over jurisdictions of the governors. We like that. It really doesn't mean a whole lot because the new governor can take out the executive order anytime they want. They can take out their own. What we're looking for again is a regulatory assurance that you are going to continue the process. The 5 years gives us a little more comfort that it's going to continue to the next administration. But again, there's always that opportunity for the governor to do it earlier, remove it earlier or something like that.
So what I'm hearing is that from the regulatory side, from the permitting side, some number out there is helpful. Some number that says, look, we're not gonna change this on a monthly basis. What I'm hearing from the other side is the number and all that shouldn't constrain us from doing review if it's necessary at any point in time. And I think that's fine, as long as we don't go a full-blown statewide remap every year. So I'm kind of back to the point that, the 3-7, something like that. Is that?
Where's the whole adaptive management strategies come into play?
Subset of this.
That would be substantial and compelling information. We can suggest we should do something.
Yeah.
I think what I'm hearing all women say is we don't want to invest $10 million in committing to a certain set of rules and maps. And in 5 years, haven't turned out underneath us and it's not over. That's their concern. I think we can still have that the regulatory certainty. Jeremiah kind of touched on it. They started the process. We have constitutional protections for ex post facto laws, things that come in and jerk the rug out. So I think we need to see how we can have that surety for the industry without harming our grass conservation strategy.
Okay, we're not going to decide this here today. Go ahead, Larry.
We're really mixing two issues here. In fact, what he's talking about is regulatory assurance and governance. We're talking about altering boundaries with the mapping exercise. So I just want to make sure there's two issues that we're discussing about here that are mutually exclusive to each other.
I don't know that they are. I think where they merge is when you look at, I have a line plan that is currently outside core, and somebody draws a line and says now it's inside, my entire set of rules change. So I think the point that Jeremiah made about respecting existing rights has a place here. I think what we're doing is builds back to the team to say, come up with something that addresses this. Doug, you had a comment?
Yeah, I've got real concern about this concept of a governor obligating a future governor beyond the term of his office. While the Constitution is silent on the term of executive order, it is not defined. And I think what you really need is legislation of some sort that will provide the continual basis for this to exist. That if you do this, this is the heart of my objection, is that the governor is just out there acting without settled law.
Thank you. All right. Yeah.
To your last point,
Yeah.
I agree with what I'm hearing the senator. there are two 5-year provisions in the executive order. There is this one that says we won't do anything unless there's zoning changes. There is another one that says this will be reviewed in 5 years. So correct. That there are two, and I think the second one goes to moderation. It's important that we do have 2 5-year periods.
Or one is 5 and one is 7. I mean, I don't know that, or whatever that is. I think what we've done is we've identified a pretty major issue in the existing order that I'm going to throw back to that team to work on. And doing that, let me tell you something, because I think you're all aware of it, just so it's on the record. I have not attended these meetings, nor does Jeremiah. We have tried to stay completely out of this process and let it work as it should, and we'll continue to do that. But I do think we've got what here is an incomplete thought, and perhaps needs to be, you need to spend a good amount of time on what we do, not only with the whereas, but the therefore. Does the 5 years belong in the whereas? There's another question. Or should the whereas say it is important to review on a regular basis, therefore we will do what? So is that clear enough back to the group to give you something to work on, Mary? Okay.
Can I paraphrase it?
Yeah.
What we're gonna do is we're gonna let how we recognize those efforts that take place in the absence of it being core differently than those that are proposed after it's done.
Correct. Correct. I mean, it's almost like where we were in 07. What do you do when you say, okay, this is core, and remember the existing rights we have, we recognize those? Well, you can't add the core without doing the same. And that's part of the equation. The other part is we are not going to do this mapping every year. No way in hell is that going to happen. Okay? So is everybody, is that clear enough for everybody? No. Okay.
Just one thought, maybe some additional information on what is compelling, because the compelling is very nebulous term for law.
Good point.
You know, and if that was a little more clear as what constituted compelling, maybe that would help guide the process.
Mary, didn't we have some language though, maybe was it in this particular one? I need your help in remembering, we had something about valid existing rights. Was it in the context of this conversation?
Yeah, it comes later. What we did is, yeah, it's coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, minor change in 36.
Well, 35 got moved to B.
Right, I saw that.
Okay, minor change.
Was it because of the reference to that?
No, so what we did is, so we have, there's 3 places where we talk about existing land uses, and we put it all in one spot.
But it is still in the order,
It's
and
in,
not just in attachment B.
no, it's an attachment B.
Okay, it needs to be in the order as well. That case redundancy is just fine.
An attachment is
Attachment B is the process.
Okay.
36, minor change. And we just wanted to, just basically embellishing on the first one.
Reset a minor change, or additional language. Is that the second paragraph there?
Well, it's the changes to the first and second, but that's the second actually gets care of number 37 before.
All right, second paragraph. Why is that peer review?
I think that was Brian's language.
Yep, because we were told from the very beginning that what was, the gold standard for core area, or they could call it, the gold standard is peer review. That's the one.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Is documentation of loss of habitat due to a fire peer-reviewed science?
What if we,
Our life counts peer-reviewed science? They're not. It could be, but they're not. I think we want to be really careful anytime you use that term that you don't preclude the expertise of our wildlife agency or others that can come in and say, look, we have identified a problem. It may even be Penny in doing her work in the field that comes in and says, whoa, we've got an issue we need to address. I mean, think of this in the terms of adaptive management. If adaptive management were all based on peer-reviewed science, hell, everything would be dead. So take a look at that one. That's your recommendation. Okay, 38.
38 is new, and it's just, and that maybe that should be in an out there for that's what I'm
Yeah, I think it follows that one above it.
It's the same 13.
Sure.
Okay, all right. Minor change to 39.
What is the difference between 39 and when you mentioned CCAs and all of those other things?
It's the same. Clean that up. 40. What is the minor change? I don't catch it.
I think this is the difference between
Permit stipulations.
I think it's all shall, and then the new language says may.
Oh, that was, okay. Just check that one more time, please. Okay, 41 was moved to B. That's probably appropriate if it moves correct. That is a process piece. 42.
Jason's two over there. No, that's the same. Looks like no change.
Yeah, I don't see it. Okay, number 43.
So there was fairly large disagreement about this and whether this should be moved to B or stay in the executive order.
I think I can tell you that the governor will demand that this remain in the executive. I don't think that's a problem, but I think the existing rights have got to be in the executive.
well, it's actually the discussion was more about, do we say it as simply as this, or do we put it in a paragraph for, clarify it for a reason? That way it was not whether or not it should be in, it's whether or not it's how should we do? Should we make it where somebody reads it, they get the nuance of it? Or should we just keep it as simple as it is? That it's not a big deal that it's, user is not at the order, it's how we deliver it. At least on my part.
I would highly encourage the group to keep it straightforward, simple, and to the point. Certainly adding the word valid is important to that, but this is, I think this one's not negotiable. It stays in the order. You can talk about how you'd like to word it. Valid is a better word, but I don't think you're going to see an executive order come out that does not recognize valid existing.
I was just gonna say, I think there could be some consideration of whether there is some duplication or a chance to bring them in the one in terms of line 35.
That's what we're on trying to be on.
That's fine. Just do not lose the.
Yeah, I agree. It should be.
Part of the discussion is whether something is going attached to the state executive order. According to authority, I guess what I'm hearing is if it's an attachment, doesn't carry the authority as if it was in the executive order. The reason I bring that up is when we're talking attached, whereas it's down to their force. And we're taking the statements of fact and stuff, moving out, does that negate or lessen their impact on conservation? I don't know if it's legal to parse it.
I can't parse it legally. I can do a little grammatic, a little structural. If it's important, it has to be in there. Redundancy never hurts you at all in this case. But each piece of all the pieces that must be a standalone executive order is the one. So that if you put this somewhere else and it's referenced, and someone doesn't have the reference, they don't know what it is. So using this as an example, you make the statement. Now, if you want to make it in attachment B and C and D, go ahead. But those major items like that should be redundant. And don't fear redundancy. I don't think that doesn't hurt us in any case. Absence will hurt us more than redundancy. Exactly.
Yeah, I guess if something happened to only be an attachment, does that lessen its authority or influence on the process?
No, I don't think that it does, but I think let's sort of eliminate the confusion. Put it. Okay, 44, minor change.
Yeah.
A lot of
And we just refer to attachment G, basically what we're supposed to see that management. That was great fun with the BLM and stuff added in attachment G. And what I've got on the screen so you guys can see, I found one that we should have, but it was cleaned up, so we've gone step by step.
Okay.
The cleaned up one is on the one. And I thought,
Given that it's lecture season, it's a local working grouse, again, it goes to many laps, or what is it? Just asking. Sherry, you're going to answer that question?
On the previous paragraph, you said that the attachment B would be reviewed annually. So I guess that ties back into the other question, 5 years review.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great catch today. Let's have some continuity in our review process. Because otherwise, you know, as you guys know, there are tons of things that come before this group, and if we're just always in review, we have no plan. So let's tighten that. Good catch, Sherry. Thank you.
What's the timeline?
They vary from no timeline to The initial one in Utah was 2. They quickly pulled that because of concerns the service had. Mark, the other EOs that you've seen, or Jeremiah, I think Montana's will be like ours, and most of the others, I think, are open-ended.
Yeah, I have to look at it, those, say, the Utah example or Montana example.
Yeah, I don't know.
And to Doug Cooper's comment, probably part of the thought process that we did have is we didn't have a customer beyond some sort of evaluation period that we would have. So that the 5 year, it just happened that we could do it with what this equipment or the previous equipment had in this review.
Yeah, and back to Doug's point, I don't think that's a bad idea. You think about a timeline in that statute that creates this issue. If that's something desirable. So we'll pursue that.
Yeah, if everybody could speak up just a little bit, it's really difficult to hear what's said down there.
Understood.
Understood.
It's by design, right?
So the first statement wasn't true. Oh, God, what did you guys have for breakfast? Okay, so 45.
It's the same. It's the same. What happened is we talked ourselves around the loop and came back.
Came back and it's the same. Okay. 46.
There's a little bit of new language, and basically it's an emphasis on the coordination again and prioritization and incentives. We don't want to lose the incentive piece, and we want to make sure that as we prioritize a lot of the projects in the core, that there's an emphasis on streamlining permit processes. So we haven't done a good job as a group on that, and we didn't want to lose that.
Okay. Yeah.
I just can't help it, but I always have problems when it specifies what we shall collaborate. It's just a little dichotomy on those words there. I always have a problem with that.
Yeah, I'm reading a book called The Boys of the Boat about 1936, the Olympic rowing team, and I'm finding great parallels with this group and that. Not the least of which is they're going over to row for Hitler. Yeah, I think that's to that point, that you shall collaborate or you shall die. It's not like.
That's just, you go to Webster's and those 2 words don't necessarily match up.
Okay, let's fix that.
Now that's an easy fix, and agree, stakeholder shall.
Team, you shall fix that. Okay. 47. 48. Move to B.
Yeah. So again,
What I would tell you to maybe check on that is the reference there, because it's been a heightened deal on grazing. You may want a fairly simple statement in the order, and then your de minimis and everything in B. Just make sure you covered that in the redundancy.
for grazing.
Yeah, that's what this is, existing land uses and what it's aimed at. So I don't think you need to go clear through all of it for Boston. 49. Same comment. Make sure you're covered briefly in the order and then pick it up in B. And I think that's probably true, clear through 51. Any other thoughts on those 3? 52. Wordsmithing. It should be recognized as now wow. Okay, Okay, 53. And that's just the data collection part, Mary, correct? All right. So we're good, folks, with that quick, dirty review.
So, Mary, just a quick, another review process piece was in 53, it says annually.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back and start with the order.
Is there another?
No, we're just gonna repeat what we just.
I was gonna drag Peter out here, but I figured I
Yeah, I'll let it go. I'll come
Yeah, when your water deal.
Okay, a couple things quickly. Please make sure that you sign in, particularly if this is your first digit meeting. We need your email and other information because you'll just get added to the distribution list. So those are in the back. Please make sure you've done that. Second thing, I'm sure that all of you heard on the break that people are having a hard time hearing. So we've got a mic up here. Let's use it so that people can hear. It'll slow us down a little, but it'll be all right. We'll be fine. We're right on track as far as time. And then I think that's it. I don't think I had anything else. Anybody pick anything up on the break other than that we need to do? We had a couple of people come in late on the team. Doug, you want to?
Yeah, Doug Miyamoto, Wyoming Department of Agriculture. Joe Budd with the Wyoming Department of Agriculture.
Anybody else join us late? Okay. All right. Okay, so Mary, let's walk through the order itself.
So that was good. Yeah.
All right. So
That's the order.
okay, that's all of it.
Yes. Okay, no, we're talking about the order.
Okay. So one suggestion, Dan, I think came from you on this was that another statement in the order should be that all attachments are considered a part of the order. Is that what the proper legal terminology?
Well, we can work on that, but it has to be part of it.
Okay, can you offer a little guidance on that to the group through Brian or otherwise, just to come up with some wording for us? I think that's a good call. Then it does refer it back to the question of bifurcated is over, and we're done. Okay, Doug? All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Tom, do you want to introduce folks from to talk noise? We'll do that now. Oh, okay. Change my plan changed right there.
Okay, hold on. Hold on.
Well, I've got a little bit of introductory material. So, next presentation is going to be on some of the noise, ambient noise monitoring that's been done. Okay.
And you guys are going to get glasses.
So this presentation is going to be on some of the noise monitoring that's been going on over the last few years. There's going to be some introductory basic sound science that I think you'll find interesting and even entertaining. So the reason that noise has come about, back when the science was done in the Powder Basin and the Upper Green that led to the 1-640 that we are all so familiar with, the question then became, well, what is it about development? What are the specific components that are leading to that threshold? So the first thing that was agreed upon by all the parties was, let's look at noise. BLM came to the table with about $500,000 of research funding that largely funded the University of California and Davis work up in the Lander area, and it has progressed through time. And as you know, the executive order talks about ambient, baseline, those types of things. Well, what is that? So We contracted with Sandhill Company to do some baseline monitoring, tried to help us determine that. They, along with Hayden Associates, did some of that monitoring last year. So I'm going to turn it over to Skip Ambrose from Sandhill for this presentation. And thanks, Skip.
Thank you. I've been measuring noise in Wyoming for 2 years now. I appreciate the chance to come here and let people know what I've done and also what I can suggest to you. Before I start, I'll get into my experience and how I've been doing this. I basically worked in Alaska for about 30 years for the Endangered Species part of the Fish and Wildlife Service. I studied ferret and falcons mostly. Toward the end of the last 15 years, I studied the effects of noise on falcons, also Dall sheep and caribou. For the last 10 years, I've worked in the National Park Service on their natural sounds program in Fort Collins. That came about because FAA and ACS were supposed to work together to develop an airport plan, and they had to get noise data to do that. And I was a part of the team that developed the acoustic program for the National Sounds Program. I had about 25 years of measuring sounds in Alaska and the Western U.S., and I think there's a lot of things in common between the issues there. I'm sorry, in the Western U.S. and in this situation in Wyoming, and we have a wide variety of acoustic situations to monitor, from 0 dB in some parts of rural Wyoming all the way up to 80 or 90 dB around drill rigs. Some of the work in the park is the same way. They were very quiet places. We had to develop a special machine that went down to 0. Also very loud places in the airport. So we have a good deal of experience doing that. And continue on a few things. There are basically 4 topics that Tom asked me to cover today. The first one is just a basic introduction to acoustics, and I'll play that in a minute. The second one is the result of my ambient studies in rural Wyoming, undeveloped areas. The third one is I'd like to rank some of the issues that have been brought up relative to noise measurement and stage development in Wyoming. And the last, if we have time, is this ambient work that I did. Jennifer has we have 2 sites that make simultaneous measurements, so there's some comparisons. We'll get to that if we have time, but I'll go ahead and start with the introduction to acoustics. We all think we know that it's important to realize how important sound is to communication. It's used to attract mates. It helps them establish territories and hold territories. It allows animals to hear the dangers coming, and allows some animals to find prey and eat. Relative to female grouse, it's something that's commonly overlooked. I think is the female chick communication is important for the female unwanted chicks and predators, and also important for her to maintain contact during brood rearing. Real basic, what is sound? It's really a pressure variation through some medium like air or water that's within hearing range of a given species. There's 2 components to sound. One is amplitude, that's how loud it is. The second is frequency, that's the cycles per second called hertz, that establishes the tone. This is kind of a graphical variation of a 1-second snapshot of sound. On the bottom, we have 3rd octave band frequencies from 20 to 20,000 hertz. That's the hearing range of humans, and a lot of animals hear it just like we do. So we use human hearing as a surrogate for species we don't know. So on the bottom is the 3rd octave bands, 31 octave bands, 20,000 hertz. On the left is a single string, the amplitude of each one of those individual frequencies. And on the right is the summation of all of those. If you want a single number to summarize the 1-second sound level, you sum all of the 3rd octave bands to get the dBA. In this case, it's A-weighted dBA. I'll explain that in a minute. A-weighting is simply adjusted for humans, but the sum of all these 31 3rd octave bands is on the right. It doesn't look like it works that way, but decibels are long, so that set of frequency there at 1,000 hertz really dominates this particular second. And the other frequencies are a little burning on the 1-second dBA of this particular second. This is an example of weighting. The graph on the left is what is actually out there in the environment. That's the actual pressure at different frequencies. It's unweighted. This is a drill rig, high levels and low frequencies, and a sage sparrow that's around the 2,000 or 3,000 hertz is a sage sparrow. But the graph on the right is adjusted for how we hear, and also how most other animals hear. We don't hear low frequencies very well. We don't hear high frequencies very well. So when you adjust it for how we hear, that's what you see on the right. There's a couple different ways to look at sound, a waveform, a third octave presentation, and also a spectrogram. The first one is the waveform. This is what you see on your computer and on TV, but this really doesn't tell us very much. It tells us how loud some sound is, but it doesn't tell us the frequency or what made the sound kind of crazy. So what we have here is a female grouse, some of our chips, the stage turtle, and more and more. Okay. So that's one way to look at it. That's the waveform. This is the third octave presentation. And it's a lot more reviewing. You can see the different frequencies and how they interact. The female grouse is around 600. The chips and the songbirds are around 3,000 to 4,000. There's not much happening here at low frequencies, no human caused sounds. So the third way to look at this is called spectrogram, and this is really the way most of us prefer. You can, in this case, the frequency is on the right, at the time it moves across at the bottom, and the intensity of the light reveals how strong the sound is. But I've got the arrows pointed at these different sound sources. Greater stage grouse chips. They're in the middle frequencies around 3,000. The female grouse is at the very bottom, and the two songbirds are at higher levels, higher frequencies. So you can see that as it comes across the chips, the female down here. So this is really the most enlightening way to look at sound if you have to look at it in a specific way. This is a different example. This is the drill rig. The drill rig is about 45 dBA, the stage thresher about 50, and this is a male stage grouse on display. So you can see the male grouse around 500 hertz, the stage thresher over here, and the drill rig down in lower frequencies. I'll show this again in the spectral view. This is the backup horn at the equipment. It's around 1250. This is the male sage grouse displaying down here around 500 hertz. And this is the drill rig. So you can hear each one of these different frequencies. The drill rig around 1250, the male grouse, and the drill rig less than 500, and the stage thresher 2,000 or 3,000 hertz. And what's important about this is this shows where there's potential for masking. You can hear the stage thresher very well over the drill rig because the drill rig is lower frequency. The male stage grouse and the female as well, they're both around 500 hertz, so the potential for low frequency noise like a drill rig is high for masking the stage grouse because they're both low frequencies. This is another example. This is an airplane, an Elk, a Grand Tetons. Airplane at 100 hertz, turboprop, and Elk around 2,000 or 3,000 hertz in their U-boat. And the example of this is there's not much overlap in the frequencies of both these sound sources, so there's a less potential for masking. Airplane down low at 100 hertz, and the Elk 2,000 or 4,000. So both sounds are pretty well distinguishable. There's not much overlap. Here's a real quick introduction. What I'd like to do is at least talk about my first three topics: acoustics, results, and issues. Maybe have questions if we have time on the last one, the comparison of the table and example measurements. So I'll talk now about the ambient sound level measurements that we did. Background song gave a little bit of it, but most noise stipulations say that noise sound levels can't go over X dBA or X dBO of ambient, so there's usually a specific number put in there. In the pop-up Pino and plant area, for example, they say the noise level shall not exceed 10 dB of ambient. They identified ambient as 39 based on an old EPA document from a study in California, rural Warren Valley in California. But those of us that have worked in this field know that 39 is not really representative of ambient in Wyoming. That was the need to try to get an accurate ambient for rural Wyoming prior to development. The objectives are study were to measure sound levels and area of gas development, and the other was to try to establish baseline pre-development 3D wanted to measure sound levels in 4 of the working groups, we didn't have funding, all 8 working groups, so gave efficient people 4 of the 8 working groups, and also kind of gave you general areas where to stay within those groups, with what that's called, but good stage and good exhaust numbers, and I selected the specific cycles I got there. These are the 4 sites we studied in the Bighorn Basin, Upper Green, the Baseball Field Basin, and the river, Sweetwater River Basin. These are the 4 of the 8 groups that we studied their sound levels in. The protocols that we followed pretty much, well, actually 100% followed the ANSI standards or outdoor measurement, which claims ANSI is the American National Standard Institute. And you can imagine measuring sound levels can be controversial on airports and highways, so there's been a real specific protocol developed for sound level monitoring and measurement. Also, the BLM and Game and Fish contracted Beckley and Petroselli to develop protocols for the work I did up there, and we followed those as well. Basically, Beckley and Petroselli followed the ANSI standards, but they all were specific about using several meters that measure less than 25, and also to put the mic height 12 inches above the ground to know the grouse air height. This is the type of measure that ANSI has prepared. There are basically 4 of these outdoor measurement, and they address several different topics. One is how you measure your field techniques, the equipment, the metrics, and how you analyze the data. As I mentioned, these were designed primarily to assess impacts to humans, but they also have the stipulation that if your target species is different than humans, adjust your mic height accordingly, and that's why Beckley and Petroselli recommended 4 inches, and we followed that. The type of equipment that we used was ANSI Type 1. ANSI has 4 types of meters, 0, 1, 2, 3, and that basically determines the stability of that meter. So a Type 1 meter is usually used in settings like this that have some sort of controversy involved. They're valuable in court cases because they're very stable over long periods of time. The systems that I had measured less than 15 dBA, and data we collected was 1 second data for the entire measurement period. It was 3 of these weighted single number sound levels, dBA, dBF, dBc. The A weighting is adjusted for human, F is flat, there's no weighting, and C weighting is for low frequencies. We also collected continuous digital recording. We collected these to be able to identify any sources of sound we weren't sure of, or look at the numerable readings from the decibel data. We also measured for at least 14 days in each site, and the reason for this was that sound and natural variation of sound, the wind, the weather, or whatever, we knew that it could be variable in 14 days pretty much covered all that natural variability. And the metrics we computed were pretty standard, L10 on max, LEQ, L10 on 50, and L90 on 20 a minute. We also collected wind speed results. Wind speed has a huge influence on sound level data. This is pretty much a typical setup. In the bottom case, we have a sound level meter, a recorder, and the batteries. And on the left is the microphone. We've got the phone windscreen. And it's got a little metal bird spike so birds don't perch on top of the phone. This is the inside of the telephone case. You've got your sound level meter, digital recorder, and batteries are right in one of those. The metrics that we collected and also ANSI recommends, primarily the L50 and the L90, these are exceedance metrics. So the L50 is exceedance at 50% of the time. It really is median, half above it and half below it. And it's a good representation of the typical sound level of all sounds in a given area. And ANSI recommends the L50 be used to establish the existing ambient sound level. ANSI also recommends using the L90 at the quietest 10%. And the reason they suggest that is because that is the way to estimate ambient without introducing sources like aircraft, vehicles, and so forth. It's a common metric to use to establish the background. LEQ is a true average, it's an energy average, but since decibels are logarithmic, one single short event, even a 1 second event, can greatly elevate hourly sound average. So LEQ is not a good metric to use for trying to represent typical sound levels. L50 is a much better metric. This is the type of data we compute for each site. The metrics across the top, L10, L50, so on. number of hours. We do this for every hour of the day, all 24 hours. And once we compute this table for the hourly averages or metrics, we can also compute any period of time you want. Like for ground, it's 1800 to 0800. So we can take those hours and compute what the averages are for those hours or any specific hourly group that somebody needs. In Wyoming, we found that pen levels were very low. The percentage, three results are L90, L50, and one of our, we have a 1-inch low noise mic. But for all hours of the day, the average sound level was not average, typical L50 was 19.3, and the L90 was, back up, the L90 was 15.1, the L50 19.3. And I put a less than in front of these because when your systems just go down to say they can measure down to 13.5 dBA, that just means when your readings get that low, the actual levels are lower than that. So all you can say is we know that it's less than 15.1. For the periods important in the stage grouse, looking period 1800 to 0800, the L90 was less than 13.8. At one side, I was able to get a low noise mic for 1 week, just to compare it to the other L90s. This column on the left, the L90s are all less than. With the 1-inch mic, it measures down to 0 dBA. And so we know that for all hours of the day, the L90 was 12.1. And for the working hours, the L90 was 7.2. So there's a substantial difference in measurements using good equipment. This just kind of shows that it is quite places in Wyoming and use equipment to measure that, will capture that. These are the 4 sites broken down individually for different outdoor periods. There was some differences between the sites, but not very much overall. If you look at the right column, minute max, there wasn't a great deal of variation. I wanted to include those 2 columns at the bottom because the governor's order has uses the 0500 for several. They say sunrise, but that's not sunrise hours. So I wanted to show there wasn't much difference between sunrise hours and the entire collection hours, 1800 to 0800. But more importantly, I want to show that if there's grouse on the left, 500 to 700, or 500 or 700, you really can't use that to determine what existing conditions are because the grouse can be very loud if you're right next to the left. So an alternative is to use the 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock hours because the grouse aren't there then, yet the noise levels are very similar to what the governor's order specifies. This is the median L50 and L90 by hour for all 4 sites. I think what's important here is that early morning, late evening, all of these places, the sound level was at the limit of the lower limit of the sound level meter. And so all it shows is that these are quiet places. We need better equipment than I had. But it's also important for me to stress that we had 4 sites that we rated this year. 2 were in kind of river valleys, Hillary Valley bottom, and 2 were on top of bridges or flat areas. And 2 of them were very windy, and 2 of them weren't. I think one on the bridge was not windy, one on the bridge was windy. When the valley wasn't windy, one on the valley bottom was windy. So you had different wind scenarios here. What really makes these sound levels go up during the day is the wind. There's not much happening in rural Wyoming. And so all these increases that we see are due almost entirely to wind. This again is the 4 sites broken down L90 by hour. And I said there's 2 of those that get more wind during the day. One of those was the hilltop site, one was the valley site. And at the bottom, L90 was pretty low all day long. There wasn't much wind in either one of these. One was hilltop, one was valley. The summary for the Wyoming Indian is that all day long, 2 hours, 2400 hours, the ambient is less than 15.1 for working hours. It's less than 13.8, and sometimes considerably less if we use low noise equipment. We also found that wind is the primary influence on sound levels, but during working hours, that wind is almost entirely absent. That's probably why grouse are looking them. And the most pressing need, I think, at this point is to determine what level is critical grouse. What level above, what level are grouse negatively impacted? That's something we don't know yet. I'd like to talk now about some of the issues that have been brought up relative to measurement protocols. And I have to stress all the time that these are not about impact assessment. This is simply how we measure noise. Impact assessment is a different topic. And I have to go back to my time with FAA, and yes, when I first got there, both agencies collected noise in a different way, and there was no resolution. And so I got both sides together, and we came up with a method to measure noise. Both sides agreed to it, and we've never been sued for data relative to FAA and Air Force studies. So I think it's important that we establish protocols, otherwise the data are not going to be comparable. I know the impact assessment is a different topic and it's difficult, but I wasn't here to try to assess that. Now, why do we need standards? Here's some of the previous ground studies I've looked at in Wyoming. I've seen all sorts of systems use type 1, type 2 meters. They've got noise floor from -0 to as high as 30. They have microphone height from 12 inches to 96 inches. The microphone placement is varied from open areas to stage areas. Some of these studies analyze data with all wind speeds. Some analyze data with only wind speeds less than 5 meters per second. Measure the period range from a day to 24 hours. Distance select, distance source varied, time of day varied. So these really, some of these results really are not comparable. And we do need a standard to kind of get these all studies done the same way. There's some of the protocol issues that we have. I'd say about 75% of the letters that I got talk about asking me or telling me how you assess noise impacts to grouse. And that wasn't my task. My task was to measure noise. So what I tried to do is take what those issues in those letters were and put them on the board. These are both industry people, but Jim Henderson and Hayden Lee also added some of these. But these are the basic issues that I've summarized from I see in Wyoming. The questions arising around sound level measurement. One is equipment capabilities, what data, how do you collect ambient, how do you collect compliance, what metrics to use, where do you put your mic relative to the light, open area, stage area, on the edge, whatever. How high is the microphone, how long the microphone, and how do you analyze data relative to wind speed. The good news is, I think some of these protocol issues are straightforward. If we follow what ANSI recommends, I think we're going to eliminate half of our battles. And we also won't lose in court. ANSI standards were developed by experienced statisticians. They set up in court, so we follow what we can on ANSI, we'll be in good shape. But a lot of these things I think can be addressed by ANSI. Equipment capabilities, the data, the metrics, microphone height, how long, what do you do with wind? I think ANSI answers all of these. What we don't know, and what needs to be resolved, what we do with FAA is to establish some agreement on where and how you establish ambient, where and how you measure for compliance around LEX, where you place the microphone relative to LEX, in the center of the LEX, the edge of the LEX, some distance, in stage and open areas. And the bottom one we really haven't addressed yet is how do we assess noise impacts on female and woodland areas. I think these need to be addressed, and we need to just resolve them. I don't think they're impossible. There's pros and cons to any approach we take. We just have to get the standard. I think we can do that if we try. So that was really my first three topics. And if you want to take some questions on these, I'll do that now. And then talk about the hazing and female measurements in a minute. Does anybody have any questions on stuff I talked about?
Maybe I missed it, but what time of the year were your study take place?
Always April 2013, April 2014, always in April.
Questions? Audience, anybody? You pick, why did you pick it?
Well, lighting is from March 15th to May 15th to April.
Some in that, you're looking.
Oh, just relative to state labor stage about that, the middle of the election season, so I picked April. Okay, my question was, why did we measure in April? The reason was that's the prime lightning period. And any other questions on that? That's it.
So you picked 8 that are all pretty quiet. There are other like areas that have background
Well, the purpose of this was to try to assess is accurate, the 39 dBA ambient. I'm sorry, 39 dBA, is that an accurate ambient sound level? And ambient meaning absent oil and gas development. So the goal was just to try to develop a sound level before oil and gas came in. I didn't realize it'll change once oil and gas does come in. And next might succeed, but the purpose of this was just to measure and determine sound levels before development came in.
I mean, throughout the state, all kinds of, along highways, all those kinds of things that ambient noise for many lights is not required.
Well, I would probably maybe disagree on this. In some cases, you're right, but that's the purpose of the L90 is to try to determine what would that ambient be without the highways or the high flyer jets and so forth. And I totally agree that sometimes it's fine in some situations, but really the goal was, and the L90 metric is to say, what is the sound level absent these other noise? And that's not saying that's the level you use to monitor grouse, patch, or whatever. That's just establishing the sound level. That this is what it is before development. We know it's going to go up. The level that impacts grouse, it wasn't my duty to assess. So it really was just an attempt to establish background and before development.
Let me parse that if I could and help me understand this. There is a difference between existing background and ambient, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think that's where people get lost in this, Rich, and I think it's to your question. Existing background is not, when we use the word ambient, I think we thought that meant existing background. That's what noise is there today. So if Doug feeds every morning at 6 o'clock, that's his tractor feeding at 6 o'clock. That's the normal background noise. What ambient attempts to determine is what noise level is there absent any of that. Is that fair?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I think another thing to follow up on that, people have asked me, how can you use the L90 for background and the L50 for compliance? I think it's easy to answer, but if you look at the bigger picture, when it's not windy, L50 and L90 are within 1 dB. There's so little happening in rural Wyoming at midnight to 4 a.m. It's just going to be a quiet place, L50 or L90. So I understand your question. Like, what you're trying to say is, how can you use L50 for one thing and L90 for the other? But that's just a standard way of always acoustics. You have to try to establish what was before the noise came. And then once the noise is there, you want to monitor less, you include all noise, highways, drill rigs, airplanes, and everything else.
I guess that wasn't the point I was trying to get to. The point I was trying to clarify, and probably the difficult thing for a lot of us is that I was on a left yesterday within a quarter mile of the railroad track. Birds continue to display, they continue to breed, they continue to nest. Clearly, their background noise is different than what ambient is. And so, if you go in and overlay, there's another lek near the town of Pinedale. Tom, you're familiar with that. You hear all the sounds in the town of Pinedale, and those birds are fine, whether they've acclimated or whatever. So, but if you went to say, you can only go above ambient, they're already there. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to sort through as we address this is, where do we hit a point where it becomes dampening to the birds and their ability? And that's where that difference, I think we need to understand that quite clearly between background and ambient, why it's different. So.
There's a couple things I'll say. One, I agree that's the most pressing need, what level of both which is bad for grass. But again, that wasn't what I was asked to do. I was to establish ambient. But along the railroad, there's something else. I always look at Jackson Hole Airport. It's a busy place and the grouse are doing pretty well there. But there's a quiet time. You can't fly from like 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So the grouse have a chance to have a quiet period. Also, the railroad is not 100% constant. All the noise sources I've measured in the gas field is pretty much constant all the time. And when I studied the impact of sonic boom on elephants and caribou, and we realized there wasn't much there. It was loud, but it was short and it was over. And recent studies are showing that chronic noise, continuous noise, is actually worse for wildlife than the short continuous events. So I agree that the most pressing need is what level. But I think it's important that we have to start somewhere. We have to establish everything. And once we establish it, it won't change. That's the way it was. We can go ahead and start monitoring lights and so forth.
So I'm gonna disagree with both of you a little bit. The birds on the Jackson Hole Lake are there. I would not say they're doing fine. There's less than 10 birds there. So we were picking out the tail end of the curve, that there are some. When you look at the biggest lakes in the state, they're in the quietest areas. So we've demonstrated some of those kinds of effects. So yeah, we can point out areas where there are lacks, but okay, what's their average lake size compared to the noise levels? That's the thing.
Brett, shoot two quick ones. Can you draw a quick conclusion between 39 in California versus that we had here? Any reasons why?
Well, Gail did really extensive research on that, and it was measured in a farm valley for a couple hours, and it was a period where there was farm equipment, road equipment, and maintenance were loaded. It was really not realistic at all. That same study said that ambient and wilderness was about 14 to 16 dBA, and that was really more what we find relative better ambient to use, but rural farm valley in California sounded good. A lot of agencies use it, it's just not very good for where we are.
The second one was, did you look at the frequencies of the sound of the wind versus the sound of the birds as you did with the other noises?
The wind tends to be low frequency, but I'm not going to get to it. There's kind of three different types of noise due to wind. One is natural, wind due to bushes, wind due to leaves. That's there irrespective of the equipment. Sometimes when you put equipment out there, like at 60 inches, like for human, wind can have pseudo noise. It can go over the diaphragm and go from max levels to spike. It can also just wind hitting the phone as not a true natural sound. It's their own because the mic is there. So there's two different kinds. But your answer is both of them are low frequencies. Wind itself is like 39.5 hertz.
Okay, we got to keep going, guys. Go ahead, Larry.
Just one quick question where you showed the drill rig. What was the distance from the drill rig, and did you identify the power source of the drill rig? Big difference between deep turret diesels and gas electric.
I just measured the drill rig, and actually 45 is about 500 meters for a drill rig. That's like one of the loudest sources in the gas field. But that's about 500 meters. I don't know what kind of engineering it was.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to go back to my talk, or wait. I can wait
About 20 minutes.
I think back to the slideshow. Go ahead. You can start it. Okay, I got this contract to do the ambient noise work. Industry wanted this in the representative with me, so Jim from Hayden Wing came with me. She measured simultaneously at 2 sites with me with her equipment. We wanted to do a comparison study, but Jim was told like 60 inches. Mine were 12 inches, so they really weren't comparable. We knew they wouldn't be. So to address this, I also put an extra system at 60 inches. So I wanted to make something comparable. That was the goal. We only had a system at 12 inches, one at 60, and Jim had one at 60. The Hayden Wing had a noise floor of about 17, and mine could have a noise floor of about 13. This is the first site. This is Green River, and what you see is Hayden Wing at 60 inches, and rated it's pretty much do the noise floor during lighting hours from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock in the morning, just sitting at the noise floor of the equipment. When the wind comes up, this dash line is the wind. When the wind gets up about 1.5 to 2 meters a second, you see immediate impact on sound levels. And so this is how we can tell that the wind is really impacting sound. This is my system at 60 inches. Compared to Jim's system at 60 inches, they're basically the same as you'd expect, other than the noise for first system, like 17, 9, 13. So during those lighting hours, are just based on the noise for the equipment, which means the sound levels are actually a lot lower. This is all three of these put together. I'm just trying to reemphasize that no matter what system you use, no matter what microphone height, basically on a rig, valley, sage, during the evening and morning hours, there's not much wind, it's going to be quiet where you are. As I mentioned earlier, for 1 week, I did a 1-inch low noise mic, and this was also at Green River, and what you see, the top line is basically the noise floor, but standard system, about 13 dBA. And then you see the low noise 1-inch mic, and then below that, and you got down to 2 or 3 dBA, it got down to 0 quite a bit. But during the working hours, it's really quite 7 point, the L9 was 7.2 dB in this case. This is north of Jeffrey City. This site was also in kind of a small swale, but the winds were a lot higher there than the Green River site. But again, it just shows you the same thing. Early morning hours, there's hardly any wind. The noise level is the noise from the equipment. When the wind comes up just above 1.5, 2 meters per second, the wind starts going up. The sound level starts going up as well. It was really clear that wind was the primary factor influencing sound levels in rural Wyoming in April. This is one more example of it. This is for 1 hour, 3,600 seconds. So I tried to plot both the sound levels for each second with a specific wind speed. And what you see is the higher the wind gets, the more the influence on dBA level. So down less than 1 meter per second, they're both about the same. As you get higher up, there's a lot more influence from wind. That's why I had a little comparison. Like I said, there wasn't much there. It did show the difference of 60 and 12 inches. And this was going to end up with these are the kind of issues we have in front of us now. And these aren't impossible to resolve. We can do it. And we just need to get the standards to realize it's the same method and equipment here for us. Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
On looking at when the noise went up associated with the wind, did you have any background noise? In other words, was the wind actually carrying the noise to the site, or were they quiet sites that you were just picking up wind noise?
The question was the wind actually carrying some noise to these sites? I think that would happen, yes, in the gas field, and it does. The direction of the wind really does determine how loud it is. But in these sites, there was no nearby noise source. And so, and there's also not many events that we could see in the data. It really was mostly wind that made this go up. In the case of the 12-inch mic, it was wind through the vegetation. Wind was not more than 2 meters per second at 12 inches in the sage. At 60 inches, it was over the chart and it had a lot of influence. Okay. Anybody else?
So did you put the mic in the middle of a big black or on the edges? Or?
No, this study was not about a before and after, like what was it before and after, what the model that is, really just what is the ambient and sage habitat in rural Wyoming. There were lectures, but I made a point to stay away from lectures because lake and grouse have a huge impact on sound levels if you're right next to the lake. And that's why I brought up that 5 to 7 graphic. The governor's order does say measure 5 to 7. But when you do that at the edge of the lake, you're going to get grouse noise more than anything. So an option is you could use 3 to 5 would be about the same level, absent grouse noise. We weren't measuring lakes at all in the study, just on the ambient sage habitat.
So the grouse are adding close, they're adding how much?
Well, it could be within 100 meters, 40 or 50 dBA, just the grouse themselves. But I asked this question when we first started, for all these orders, like the governor's orders, is this meant to include grouse sound? And the answer is no. We want to know what human grouse sounds are getting there, not the grouse sound. So the goal is to eliminate grouse, and we know it's there. We want to measure it at the lake. We have to find some way to not consider the grouse sounds. We can measure from 1800 to 4 o'clock, and it was the same as 5 to 7 absent grouse. So there are ways to find out what level would be without grouse display. But they can contribute significantly to the noise on the lake. They do. Yes, ma'am?
You talked briefly about setting up a standard mechanism to study noise. Is there any movement on that?
Well, like I said, we did with FAA and NPS, and most people would say just follow ANSI. That does lay things out pretty well, but every case has something a little different, like we're studying lakes and grouse. And so I think we can adjust our protocols to match ANSI and follow it, but I think the answer is yes. I think we can establish things like the questions I had on the last slide. Where and how do you measure around the lake? Right at the perimeter, some distance. There, I think it'd be fairly straightforward to sit down and come to an agreement like how we measure noise in sport. And it would really eliminate a lot of controversy. I mentioned we never get sued for collecting data if you have a good standard and you follow answers. We'll get sued a lot for assessing impacts, but that wasn't my job.
Yeah, and let me put an exclamation point on this. The purpose of the presentation today was to help us understand how the science of noise is done. This is a policy discussion today as far as, because quite honestly, we don't know what level that is, and there are a lot of things to consider, folks. If, for instance, if the issue is that we want to be below a certain sound level at the time when acoustics are important to grouse, that could be a timing stimulation. That could be a sound level at a certain time. We've already addressed them. So we don't know what the outcome is, but I think we need to be ahead of the curve on it. I think we need to be prepared to have a conversation about it. And given all of the debate and everything, I thought it was good that they were willing to come. This is the only chance we had because you're headed to Alaska.
Okay, if I get like for Wyoming, I mean, Alaska, maybe as well,
Yeah, so if this was a chance to hear this. We're going to come back to it. There will be a lot more. And right now we have 2 tasks in front of us. This isn't one of them. I think let's keep that in mind. But this is great information. I think it's real helpful to understand the science and the technique and everything else behind it. So that's the purpose. Doug?
Just looking down the road, I don't know if we're here today, but can this subject be brought into the revision of the executive order? Or is this going to go after we kind of get everything in place?
I think this comes after. I think for us to try and comprehend all of this science, and it's fairly nascent science as it relates to grouse, for us to try and comprehend that, and pull that into the executive order in any change other than what we were advised originally is probably a real reach. Now, if we get there, great, but that's not the highest priority right now for us. Yes.
I think our statements on science throughout the executive order leave a placeholder for this.
Absolutely.
You know, so and I also want to say that a lot of the questions that came up today are clearly some of the parameters of the next levels of research we want to look at. So that's, you know, this set a stage for it, which was the overall objective. As I think you said, I think we've got a baseline now. And so everything else is building off that baseline. So your questions are very specific to the next thing we need to research. And then we begin to look at it as sound comes in, what happens to the leg to come. You know, is it just A-okay and it goes on? Or is sound a limiting factor? So those are places that we allow for in our science discussion in the whereas, and that we're prepared for as we go forward this study.
Well, I think I'll be in Pinedale in April, and if the noise committee gets together then, I think we could, I don't want to say modify, but we could clarify the governor's order. Like, do we measure 5 to 7, and how far away from the edge? I think it'd be fairly straightforward to clarify that. When I came, I was confused, like, what did it really mean? I don't think it takes much to clarify that and establish protocol for measuring the plan.
And I think that may be the case. I certainly would welcome that conversation in April. But again, I think for us to come in and say, you know, we're going to alter the 10 that we have now based on 1. And I do think the points that were raised here, for instance, where do you measure? And then you have the question of, okay, if let's say we all knew that 8.5 above ambient, if you will, causes an aversion by birds. Well, okay, 8.5, but if you can't hear something because it's 0.6 of a mile away and the wind patterns or otherwise don't allow that sound to carry, do you regulate that and not regulate the one that's a mile away that pounds right down the draw and hits them with sound? That those are really the things that we need to think about. And it's not as simple as drawing a circle and saying, okay, now do this. It really has to be cause and effect related to what is impacting the bird. And so we will try to move forward with that with our Okay, a couple other questions that we're gonna move on. Anybody else?
Will this presentation be available to us? I think it's extremely interesting.
Yeah, let's, please. Okay, come on. All right, good, Jim.
The only other question I had for him was, how much variation was there between the sites that you had out there as part of your measurements? You had a lot of everything put together, but was there a lot of variation between the sites?
Overall, it was, might be from 13.8 to 18 was the total variation, really not much. It's around all 4 sites, there are different situations, different winds and so forth. And part of the reason is that when it's not windy, it's all flat. That way, when it gets windy, it's going to get more higher levels, so it's windier, but overall, not much variation. I don't think much variation.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Mary, back to the attachments.
All right, so let's go down through attachment 8. I'm going to ask you.
Mary, you have a copy?
Yes. So there's, from the document that's on your screen to this document, there's a little bit of version control, but essentially it's the same thing. Attachment A in the past was just a map of the core areas. What we attempted as a group to do was work through how we created the core areas and how we're looking at it, and just provide some verbiage so people know that it wasn't just arbitrary. And it's basically the science behind it and the process that we use. There are also, so up there on the screen, and for some reason my computer is overloading. But we can go through it. There's a, like I said, there's a few changes and Dan picked those up, but I don't think we need to worry about those right now. But essentially what we did is that what the core areas mean, and it goes back to Brian Kelly with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, creating that the core areas are mitigation for non-core activity in non-core area. And if we can't meet what's our priority, it includes our mitigation strategy and minimization strategy. And the purpose of core and the purpose of non-core and the purpose of connectivity. So the first is really 2 pages. We tried to make it brief, but we thought this was very important.
Okay.
Mary, this is including.
Pardon? Yes. Yes. So there is, in this document, like I said, there was some version or control. The one that's on the screen is the correct one, and there's just some minor changes from Jenny that the document you have, but we have captured everything from Jenny in this document, and this is the one that's on the web now.
And I would point out that the titling for a minor is significant.
What's that?
The titling of the page, we thought development had way too strong a filled-out message in it because of the way we talk about developing gas, developing mines, and so forth. And so establishing the core area, we thought was a better title. And that I say that mostly because we then use that as the flavor throughout. This is how we came to what we came to and why it was.
So it doesn't prescribe anything, it just describes what we did and what we intend to do in the various areas. It's a description, not a prescription. I don't, it's all new language, but, well, it's not new language, it's language taken from all our clarification and our past minutes and put it into there.
Yeah, that's what we want to do. Okay, so let's walk on through.
Okay, anything on attachment A on page 1? Anything on page 2?
Yeah, numbers, but again, I think we want to avoid that.
The numbers. You're tracking page 2, line 6.
The 82%, sorry about that.
Huh?
Are you looking at the numbers?
64, 82%.
Yeah.
Although in this case, you could actually leave it because it's telling what was done, which is probably appropriate to do. Just make sure we check the numbers, make sure they're correct.
But we're trying to adhere to the deliberate track record.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This might be a place, those information items that go into it, whereas if they want to put that, those things in this particular piece. This is part of the narrative.
Yes. Yeah, it can be duplicative if you're in doubt.
Just watch for consistency. I know in the whereas we have 24% of the state, we've got 23% here. 12%.
And what we're planning on doing, because these are bookmarks until we get the final numbers from this. So you got version 2, version 3, and we need to just be very clear about the snapshot.
Yeah. What we want to do today is go through, tell us where the areas you're proposing changes are.
Okay, so this is it.
Any more opportunities to look at this?
Okay, let's move on to attachment B.
Well, just before we get there, just on connectivity for a second.
Yes.
I thought it was really important with all the discussion of the query now and connectivity between queries. This indicates at this point that connectivity is just between us and other states, and then there's a lot of proposals for between population within the state. So I simplified that language to talk about connectivity between populations rather than just between populations in separate states.
Okay. When you look at connectivity, one thing to remember is that in many, many cases, it is a moot point because it already exists. You don't have to draw an alleyway from every single query to the other.
Oh, and I'm not implying that we should.
No, I do work, but I think we need to be very clear about that in your narrative.
Something about the difference between like a migration
Very well, the connectivity areas are between disparate habitats used. Their connectivity between Upper Green and land exists, the whole corridor is connected. So that there's a difference in yeah. Okay. All right, Mary B.
B. Okay, so then we have the clean version, and then we don't mind to some of these around. And then we have the side-by-side version. And this is actually the right version. And you do this right behind that. They're going to be glad that I'm over here. All right. So attachment B is really the process of all the compliance stipulations and recommendations as state and federal permits are reviewed. So we can just go through line 1. What we did is it's just minor changes, clarifying basically when state agency permit is needed without the need for a federal permit, and a federal agency permit is needed with or without a state permit. It's just some clarification. So there's not, basically we work with our partners just to make sure it doesn't sending people to the right points.
One thing that has come up just kind of out of ether in the last couple of weeks, not even related to this effort, is our 1 per 640 is not abundantly clear to people who haven't worked. And so you might want to put in where in the parentheses on that first line, you would say 1 activity per 640 acres, and then make the 1 per 640 in parentheses the summation of that. It's there, Mary, but it isn't clear. I find that dealing with other states. So that's something to clarify. Yeah, okay.
Got it. Okay, and I may ask Nicholas to help in some of this, because this is what he does on a daily basis, as well as Amanda. The maximum density disturbance process, again, this is just what we did, we got rid of the word buffer. Everyone thinks that the buffer is an NSO. We use radii, make sure that when we're using the DDCT, we use radii. There's not many changes, we just, and then number 3, what we took is that's a lot of blah, 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 blah. And Nicholas broke it into diagrams, and we have diagrams for verbiage that we have.
Mary, we go back to something we mentioned that I think we need to make clear. First point of contact for addressing sage-grouse issues in core area habitat for any state command, etc. I think we need to make it crystal clear in there, as we talked about before.
Okay, anything else, 2, 3? All right, so number 5, we had carried the habitat assessment from our very first document. We use the habitat assessment for siting, whether it needs to be in here, it's something we do on a regular basis. It is confusing for people. And we use our reclamation criteria against it. So what we're hoping to do is do it.
Pull it out. And again, why?
Well, we don't really, at first we got, from the habitat assessment, if you see it, you have to see the whole DDCT area. Now we don't use it at all in the DDCT. It's just for siting. It's just a habitat assessment, you can find a better place for siting.
Okay, I don't want to lose that thought. Do you have that somewhere else? I don't know that you have to have this entire litany of.
It could be an A, Bob, as part of the description of the core area plan.
Yeah, I think we want to make it clear that we want to site outside suitable habitat wherever possible.
So we do have that in places.
Okay.
I'll double check.
All right, okay. All right.
I got it circled.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and then, all 6 is just the map, but that's already been done in the DDCT. Okay, and I do have Jenny's comments on this. We are good with this. This is all good. So what number 7 is we have worked as a SGIT, and we have done clarification and done an incentives and mitigation structure. And basically saying we want to first work. You know, we want to always try to mitigate inside the performance-based project and within the DDCT assessment area, and within the same core area, and then either adjacent, blah, 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 blah. And then finally, we want to do offsite. So that was from our original.
I know.
Should these be numbered? What's that? Should they be numbered? So
Yeah, it's not number, but these one is.
yeah.
No, here's the concern that I have is that what makes good logical sense on a piece of paper doesn't always work on the ground. And we were locked into this mentality that we would always look within the project area for mitigation. We did not ask ourselves, what is the best thing we can do for the bird? And that has to be the first assessment. So if it's not a hierarchy of do it here, then do it here. It's evaluate that whole suite of potential mitigation outcomes and relate that back to what's best for the bird given the circumstances we have. So, you know, if number 1 doesn't work, that's not a fail. You know, and if number 2 doesn't work, that's not a fail. It comes down to what do we do that is the best thing we can do for the birds, the species, and considering it across the entire state. We've got to catch that, because what happens is this gets run into a table or a matrix or something, and all of a sudden we're out there planting sagebrush, driving over the top of football trees, and saying, oh gee, this didn't work. Well, hell no, it didn't work. It was a dumb idea. So let's really, we need to really zero in on this, because this is going to be a huge issue in the next 5 years. This will probably be the one that suddenly elevates. You know, what do you do that really has a meaningful outcome?
The other concern I have on this job is it seems that a lot of places, I'm starting to hear regulators that go into the habitat exchanges, conservation land, they get there very quickly because it's easy. And you know, it may be easier for some than others. So I want to be very careful when we come to this concept of paid plan.
Can I comment there? I think that that's one of the things we're trying to make ultimately clear in the description of this plan. The plan is based around avoidance first, not mitigation first. That's why we put the pyramid. We talk about the avoidance pyramid, not a mitigation pyramid, and work our way down to mitigation. So I completely agree with you on that, and that's the basis for our plan. So I really do want to.
Yeah, well, if you look at that list, the way that's presented, it says priority preference. You could put a 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of those dots. However, if you get down to the bottom, number 6 could be number 1.
But and then I think what we talked about is that you could, but you need to look at all of those. It's not that you have to. It's that you need to look and see if there's something that makes sense for the bird in number 1, and then.
So we need to change the wording, I think, from priority preference to you shall evaluate what is best for the bird and the habitats that are most limiting, or something to that effect. And in doing so, evaluate each of the following, not a priority preference, because that becomes a numbered list right now. And that's not what we want.
No, and that wasn't.
Okay, just you get it.
And yet we have to keep it clear that that's in the evaluation process in reviewing a plan, not in the hands of the person determining what's easiest for them.
Correct. It's a joint effort, I think. I mean,
well, you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah. Let's not tie our hands.
And I think the rest of the language talks about that, you know, the performance order for the permitting agency, just like, you know, within the mixed area, and it goes through the common sense. So I think that the following is fine.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sentence compensatory mitigation shall only be used when either local or adjacent alternatives are not possible. Doesn't make sense to me.
You're right.
You have those adjacent.
Yes. The point was that it says the compensatory mitigation is done where, I can't find it all. Shall only be used when either local or adjacent alternatives are not possible. Well, back to the point I made about number 6 could be number 1. This is exactly the same thing. That could be adjacent, it could be, and it comes back to getting rid of this hierarchy. You guys have heard me gone on about this before. If you disturb habitat that's ephemeral habitat that birds use off and on, and you can replace it with really valuable nesting habitat, you may want to make that trade. It's not a like for like. It's what's best for the bird.
And I just,
Yeah, don't do it here. You guys need to go back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question. Well, you have a point. Governor's comments on subdivision, does talk about this application priority, but also talks about the need for flexibility. But I see flexibility. It's been talked about here. So internally, we need to look at it relative to how we would look at it in the design plan or other plans.
Chairman, I was to make a suggestion, Mary, for our next meeting, the subcommittee, we have the governor's comments on the plan. Email it prior to our meeting, so we have a chance to review it.
We might. Yeah, you'll have them now.
Email that you read.
Okay.
So be well. All their draft.
No, this is the draft.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
Yeah.
all right. Okay, moving on. 8 is just some minor changes. What is PDCT page and I'm going to go to exempt activities, and this is where we can put the benefits on the way back into the goal, but it just talks about existing land uses, grazing, those type of things. And we go into the stipulations. And that is essentially the same, no changes. Surface disturbance, we pulled the non-core information out of it here. The surface disturbance is the same. Surface occupancy, we pulled that from, otherwise it's the same. So one of the things that you notice is line citations, and what we're looking to do is go back to all the research. And we're going to plagiarize the citation, but we're looking to find all the citations.
That's good. That's good.
We just wanted to get through it.
Mary, can we go back up to number 9? While this goes to our timing discussion, we talk about existing land uses, shall be recognized, respected, as 308. Clearly, if we make so working substantial or compelling changes to the existing core area map, should we not consider having to make the adjustment here to pre-2015?
Yes,
Anything that's in non-core right now, we would want to treat exactly like we treated non-core, well, everything pre-opening.
I think we'll just put a marker there.
Yeah, if that's an issue.
Yeah, if
it becomes an issue, we need to
post.
And just perhaps, and that we talk about existing land uses in that heading, we're also talking about existing rights. Not necessarily. For me, that's
Valid existing rights and land uses. Okay. Got 13.
We go for non-core.
No substitute change. Okay.
We added geophysical exploration that hasn't been covered before in the previous, and we do have our geophysical exploration. There has been some conversation, some geophysical exploration is minor, while others, staging area So what we're doing is saying the actual physical activity is minor outside the timing steps, but you really should plan for the staging areas.
It's kind of like a pipeline compressor station, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Transportation is no change. And then I'm gonna turn this over to Sherry to talk about overhead lines and applicant changes. She made a lot of changes.
So we have an applicant guidance.
Speak up.
We have an applicant guidance document coming out, hopefully this spring.
That will address specifically power lines and safe routes and some of the things that what utilities can do to minimize impacts to routes from construction through operations and maintenance and some actual decommissioning of lines. And so we use that as a reference in here as a citation and removed the rafter proofing in there because that really is not effective. It can actually create the problem worse as part of testing. And so referring to the applicant document is kind of fine. And that was developed with service, BLM, and WAFA implementations involved in that process too. The other thing that we have in here is a comment, I'm not sure if we want to put this in or not, but what we've done in Rocky Mountain Power is taken the second order and make the process flow chart so that we can understand it and break it down for transmission, what we need to do in distribution, if you're forward, non-forward, kind of like almost like that process key. We use that internally. If that's something that would be helpful for other utilities once we finalize the changes, you know, put something similar together for that. So that's another option. And then other than that, the language basically stays the same.
Let's make sure that we run this past Sean Taylor. What I don't want to do is end up with the RAs on our list without having been consulted. So if we get the language where you're comfortable with it, let's make sure we get that. And I'll do it if you want to, but I want to make sure we get that to the world. Because they tend sometimes to come back in and wait, and I want to make sure they're brought along. Okay, with this again.
And we could do that. We've had Tri-State's been involved in that, doing that, and we've had one thought in Colorado which has been involved.
Just roll it up to the bigger text.
We're at noise number 17. So this paragraph that's highlighted here says this is an emergency science and protocols, and protocols will be defined by the city. All of that comes from the BLM right now, just to kind of say that this is an emergency work that's needs to be done. That's the only addition to that.
I would ask you to go back and consult a little with Penny as chairman of that noise subgroup on the word ambient, or at least define what it is.
He said not this. Who's the chairman of the noise subgroup?
Jenny.
Jenny Martin.
Oh, Jenny. Okay. The other end. Yeah, let's just clear what we're saying, given what we just heard here.
By the way, we are saying ambient noise, existing activity included, to me that sounds like background, correct?
Yes. It is what it says. But why does it say that?
Why don't we just say background?
Because it was probably written by while driving down the highway at 85 miles. Yeah. Correct.
So to use the scientific word and then change it.
Right.
It seems like incredibly inconsistent.
That's why I want to, whatever it is, say it right. Yeah.
It also specifies that the amendment should be made in some lots on the other left as a district scale. That's problematic for different reasons. It seems like setting that in stone, even though there's the clause that allows for the protocol notes, in that sense, one piece of stone.
I'm with you. The second part of this statement is probably the most important part. We don't know what the hell we're doing. Okay.
feel like that's a better number.
But you could make appropriate amendments and that is a sub.
Yeah, I think that one's more honest than anything else.
Yeah.
If we find out what the hell we're doing, we'll let you know.
That would be great. That would be awesome. Okay.
All right, then moving to 18, there was just a couple of sentences that were added. We wanted to verify, this number 18 was really for the mining folks, and Bruce, had made this really clear, but we never really said it in the original, is that production and maintenance activities is considered permissible once the vegetation is removed outside the seasonal skips. So that's just a clarification. And then the last two sentences, it is important that the viability of the topsoil is maintained. And then what was suggested is there's a set of BMPs that Pete had provided to the rack, the BLM rack that we want to use.
Great idea.
No, I just going to mention something here that Bruce has a different idea about topsoil stripping than I do. But for bentonite mining, this can have an unintended consequence of going in and nuking the habitat far, far ahead of where we would ever be mining. And that's not necessarily good. Oftentimes you strip 2 or 3 acres, 4 or 5 at the most at a time. Or things back to operations. So, probably better depending on market conditions. We may pull out of that area and go to a different area. We're getting ready to play. So the last thing we want to do is nuke an area and then leave it sit.
Put that in non-mining terms. You go out and strip it to protect your interest, and then you come back whenever and take care of it. Right? We do not want that. You are correct. Can you fix this to where we address that issue?
Give it a try.
Okay. Yeah.
Since Mary's doing an awful lot of reading.
Okay. 19.
Okay. All right, sagebrush treatment. Is that better? I'll use my outside voice. All right, sagebrush treatment. What we did is we started talking about a lot of the treatment inside the original. We're just referencing the protocol. That's all we're doing.
Yeah. 20. Added reference.
Yeah. And just how do you move from disturbed into suitable? What's that process?
Yeah.
Just reference.
21, I want you just to park that. We've got, that's being developed, has been developed. I think what our intent there is to adopt the adaptive management that we've agreed upon with the BLM so that we're consistent with the 9 plan and the amendments that will come back to the land later. Is that correct, buddy? Jeremiah, is that? Yeah, okay. So we will get that language to you. And Brian, understanding that you had a comment, we'll work through that. Okay.
So 22 is existing activities, and in the last 12 months, there's been a lot of interest in units, especially up in the Oregon Basin area. What this does is summarize all the decisions made from the SGIT and conversations that have taken place. The BLM has looked at it, Dwayne has looked at it. I haven't heard from you, but yeah.
Mary, I'm going to recommend we park this as well until several of us have a chance to actually. We've just recently got the BLM information. We have enough time to fully analyze it today's meeting. We'll make changes today anyway. And that's fine. We need some time to go through that and provide our thoughts.
So the summary of this is basically a pre-2008 unit or possibly a pre-2015 unit and non-core that became core. Is that you're still entitled to do whatever, but for documentation purposes, we still need to do a worksheet in the DECT to identify it. But there is no, the project goes on. And we have worked with all the unit people that have run into this. So we try to make it as simple as possible.
This moves to addressing your concerns, Mark, that we had earlier this year. So you've gone through this.
I haven't with this.
All right, so here, let's make sure that with Paul, and get with Mark, make sure we get it right. The intent here is to put in writing what we are doing now. And there have been cases where what we are doing now is not consistent with what we said we'll do, and we just need to clean that up. Okay, it applies to pre-existing units. You have already. Okay.
If Jason waits for you.
Louder.
What he said is that the BLM's run it through the reservoir management group. They've done a good job on it. What I want to do is make sure that we get the industry folks with the regulators on this, come back and make sure it's clear and it says what we need. Because the few, it hasn't been a lot. There have been a few stumbles on this that really weren't necessary, and the time it took and unwinding it. Let's get it clarified. Sure.
So the new language about unit field language is a little more vague, just saying areas of radius through level. So within a unit of right away, be considered in that as well. Yes.
Yes, within a unit, everything.
So if you notice, this language is also figured out. So it's duplicative.
And let me go back, because again, I remember there are a lot of people who are new to the process. One of the conversations that we had at the time we did this originally was, what do you do with, and I'll pick on Mark, what do you do with Oregon Basin? It's right in the middle of a safe grouse forest. And we said we're not going to create Swiss cheese. We're not going to have holes in the middle that, we can recognize those activities, but we're not going to say this is core and it's out. You can stand on either side. So the intent was to manage for the whole with recognition that there's existing activity out there. That's what we need to get back to and make sure that it's clear. So it was a unit-driven conversation at the time. It is still a unit-driven conversation. Is that fair, Mark?
Okay, going on exceptions. We had exceptions and process deviations. We'll just combine that. So you'll see the language down below. Okay, oil and gas. That's the one for 640. No change in the 5%. There's no change there. So, is Craig, yay! Glad you're here. So Craig went through the mining. He said that we cleaned it up. So you want to share what you did?
Yeah, the first part is the same. On my page 17, where it talks about coal mining, that was clarification language the decision had written. It was added into this attachment, and then it was changed to reflect the actual relationship between SMACRA and the state and how oversight is provided and the primacy of the state in the coal program. There was one question from Brenda Newman, and that was that last sentence on the page 17, says in 4 population areas. She was wondering about having federal process outlined in this document, whether or not it was necessary. So I did say I would bring that to the whole group. Other than that, the changes to the language weren't that significant, just changed to reflect land quality's relationship to SMACRA as concerned, compared to OSA.
Yeah, and I think that's good because we had to do that by letter after the first order, and there were several of those that went back and forth, and I think that created some confusion. So putting it in here is appropriate. Okay, good.
So, but the question still is, go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, the question from Brenda Newman is whether or not we should have federal process in here about the coal leases, and BLM will, evaluate coal leases. Because that's something we don't.
Right here, where appropriate, BLM will find such a. It goes back to their, I can't remember it's their coal leasing suitability analysis.
Which paragraph is that, sorry?
It's up there.
On page 18, the first paragraph.
How about we get all the coal in one place?
So she's worried that the state should not refer to BLM processes. That's the question.
Should not.
Should not. Or whether it should or should not. That sentence right there.
Looks good. Okay. Get her input and see if you can't sort that out.
Well, her input was that the state document has no real bearing on their process. I mean, this is what they do by law. We can outline what they do perhaps, but we can't really mandate they do something or not.
I agree. Good
And maybe we can reword it,
That's what I'm thinking.
because that will find. You can say that BLM uses their process.
Yeah. Jeremiah, you guys.
One question, and then you'll need to help with this. A lot of this is focused on saleable, leasable. Given our conversations a lot with locatables and everything, do we need to recognize that we do still demand some things relative to locatables in the process, either through DEQ or others? Just a question, I don't have an answer.
It's a great question, and I think I'd take it a step further. Should we separate mining into locatable and leasable? And I think maybe we should.
Is there discretionary? Some of them.
I guess I would disagree with that, Bob. The state has no difference between, we have a coal program and a non-coal program. Locatable, leasable, sellable is a federal term that we interact with them differently, but our laws are not different concerning the locatable versus the sellable.
Well, they are, for the most part, we follow the permitting process. The DEQ is the same.
But you don't have a shrub standard on locatables.
That's true.
You do on leasable or on coal.
On coal, our terms are coal and non-coal. There's shown as a leasable mineral. They do not have a shrub standard.
Correct.
I'm okay, I can put it in those terms. Are there things we need to delineate between?
I'm just gonna tell you, this was a major, how many months did we spend on this, Jeremiah? 3? And it came down to locators, and I think that, there's no reason, and Craig, if you want to differentiate coal and non-coal, that's fine. But we do have to recognize that the mining law of 1872 has bearing on what we do in the state. And I would lean towards separating them out, making it clear within the coal or within the saleable, make the differentiation between coal and other saleables perhaps, and then locatables. Yeah, I'll leave it up to you guys as a group, but I think it's worth having that conversation.
I don't think it will hurt anything to differentiate it out. Like Craig says, that's a locatable, saleable, leasable is a federal term. And yes, under locatable minerals, you've got a right to develop those minerals. we still have to follow the permit application process with NEPA and with the
And the
state
EQ things, there's no differentiation. I've seen that.
But I don't think it could hurt to have
All right, let's
something in there addressing location.
let's think about it as we move forward. I'd like you to spend a little time. Brenda?
The rules are different. The EQ rules are different for the two. They're not the same. Bonding requirements, there are differences there. So I think it makes sense that they would be different. Plus, in the cases of my law, this is 3809. Totally separate set of rules. And you as the developer, you have to deal with those at the same time, whereas on a whole, you're dealing with SMAC right and the state rules. And on non-whole, you're dealing with BLM 3809, so it's a hand. Sure. See the difference.
All right, take a hard look at it, guys. Yeah.
All right, and Nicholas, if you could help me out, because I guess people can see the document. So connectivity, there were some minor changes. And Brian, and there's no changes on the STIPs, there was just additional development.
So you just added more clarification here.
Yeah, it's just, and that's where it came to identify for dispersal routes and the purpose of connectivity. You just kind of added that.
So I do have a question on connectivity. My understanding is that the management of those areas is almost the same as core.
There's no one for 640. And it's only 5%.
We'll probably be talking about connectivity later on.
Yeah, because we got, when we get into mapping, we got that issue. Larry?
Just a quick question on the language in there. It talks about between potentially isolated populations in Wyoming. And a core population in Wyoming. Is that different than an isolated population where you have connectivity across state lines? I just wondered why we were an isolated population in Wyoming. Is that the core population? What is an isolated population in Wyoming?
We have some tiny little load for core. You know, where we were able to hold on to some substantial population, but they're significantly isolated. And so this was looking at those potential. The greatest potential, though, as reflected here, was the disturbance of transmission from the other states. Where we were really trying to, a lot of southern Wyoming birds are Colorado birds as much as they're Wyoming birds. The real particular problem in the original iteration of this was the great deal of development that's already occurred between Powder River Basin and the southeastern Montana population. So it was an attempt to keep the capability for transmission across that site. Transmission being genetic transmission, not electrical transmission.
Yeah, I'm still correct. I mean, we've got core population in my area with winter in Colorado, and we've got Colorado grouse on their second or third largest flat. They're coming into the nest in Wyoming.
Well, those are
isolated population.
That does. That's where all we had to do there was line up their core with our core to make sure that we account for that.
And those aren't transmission corridors, those are core population. There are places where transmission is more intensely needed than those sites, and those sites are, Bob said, they're lined up core.
You take the state line out of those and they're one quarter.
Yeah.
The ones we're talking about here, you don't have.
And they're not under core rules. The transmission are alleviated rules below what the standard is for.
No, because we're gonna have a discussion on connectivity related to the mapping anyway. So I believe it.
Okay, right away. This is language that is taken from previous language. The biggest thing is making sure we stay consistent.
Right, yeah, this is just pulling in what we've already done, okay? Okay,
Okay, wind energy development, there is no change. And our last one is process deviation, defined. Again, this was exceptions. So we have the three down below here. We have no suitable habitat, no safe grouse use occurred, provision of a development that shows no declines, not to result in declines. Safe grouse populations. And that's what the exception is, the ones that small declines.
and again, this is really a change. It's just a. All right,
You want to do C first, or you want to break it?
let's try and get Steve. Let's break. We'll come back to C and D, and then we'll get into mapping. We'll give us a little extra time. Let's be back at 10 o'clock.
And can you just, so everybody on YouTube, I'll send out an invite.
Yeah.
We've got about 30 minutes.
All right.